For better or worse, the Timber is probably Horizon's most popular series of models people are tired of hearing about.
I bet it's another Timber. I bet it's a 4-motor Timber. I bet it's a Timber with 8 EDFs on it.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
So, add an extra motor and it's twice as fun, right?
Do not buy me.
Wrong. It has a few strong points, but there are so many problems with how this airplane flies and handles that even its gimmicks can't really save it. When the Twimmer was announced, many people said that it was ugly, and those people are objectively correct. If the Evo is Brendan Fraser in The Mummy, and the Timber X is his role in Crash, the Twimber is undoubtedly the whale. The gigantic, ungainly wing and tiny little beak nose simply don't work together to make a cohesive-looking aircraft. Other twins like the Beech 18, Twin Comanche, or even the Shrike Commander all have these elements in balance. It's not even ugly cool like a Pilatus Porter or Yak 55, it's just ugly ugly. And as far as function, well, you'd figure with twice the motors, you'd get twice the power, right? Not quite. Just wait until you hear how much it weighs as opposed to how much thrust it puts out. With most enjoyers of our hobby suffering from 2200 vision, we'll move on to less subjective and opinion-based visual criteria that don't rely on one's ability to see. The Twimber is not totally without its charms. It does offer a relaxing and fun experience, cruising around slowly and making coordinated turns. And you can slam this cow flat onto the ground without fear of breaking the gear or dinging a prop. The gear will literally go completely flat and then bounce back to neutral. This is the best design we've seen for a bush gear from any manufacturer. Seriously, kudos to Horizon for absolutely nailing this. The main gear legs will eventually bend. Bear in mind, we didn't get it to bend until seriously trying to land as terribly as possible, so the springs are a winner. Moving on to other positives, it will do any of the normal aerobatics you can expect of a functional model airplane released in 2023, albeit worse, and if you're a fan of blue, it has blue on it. Reverse thrust works great on landings as well, making the plane slow to stop very quickly and predictably. You even retain elevator authority with reverse thrust on while in flight, unlike traditional nose-mounted motors when trying the same thing. That being said, if you get too carried away with it, you'll drop out of the sky early so you can watch that gear hard at work. But it doesn't have enough differential thrust stock out of the box for anything cool, it's lacking on the timber thrust we're used to, and it noses over when you'd least expect it in a way that ruins your mood like very few other models can, which we'll dig into next. Also, it's seriously obese, and its wretched little nose gets bent when it flips over, which it will. Issues with the Twimber start at takeoff. Put the flaps down and give it too much throttle, and it will stick its nose in the dirt and flip onto its back like a stupid dog that found something nasty to roll in. You'll be okay if you remember to hold plenty of up elevator throughout the takeoff roll, so long as you have somewhat mown grass. With a bush plane, you want to be able to punch it and get out without worrying it'll front flip, and you can't with the Twimber. We'll dig into why this happens later. Be careful correcting with yaw, because differential thrust doesn't behave like a regular rudder. This isn't a fault, but it is something to be aware of. In the meantime, you could always just hand launch this chonker to avoid these things. Once you get it into the air and you're cruising around, it's not terrible until you realize you spent $379 on a foamy to fly it in a circle. Coordinated turns low and slow are surprisingly great and are where this plane shines. Out of the box, the differential thrust can be chalked up to a gimmick at best. It serves no function with the stock differential settings other than making tighter turns on the ground and some mildly more interesting snaps, tumbles, and spins. You can't do crazy 720 acro or have a perfectly flat spin in a stock setup. However, through your Spectrum Radio or Spectrum Smart ESC programmer, you can adjust how much differential thrust the Twimber can have up to 50% from the stock 10%. What sucks though is that not only can you not adjust how much differential thrust you have, you can't use differential at all unless you have a Spectrum Radio, since there is only one ESC wire and it uses some kind of proprietary voodoo to send rudder commands on it as well. Now look, it won't do crazy locked key case style 720 acro like the Twin Otter from Flex, but that plane also comes at twice the price. If you desire sloppy, albeit fun, differential thrust maneuvers, this plane starts to become a bit more appealing, especially when you up the diff thrust to 50%. On that note, one other fun thing you can do that we don't recommend is putting the props on backwards for some insane reverse thrust mid-air. Oh, and you can optionally tow gliders with the Twimber too. We had success with this, but also had a lack of success.
Oh my! Oh no! 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 Oh no! Stop! I can't stop anything! I can't. Oh no! No!
Don't be fooled though, the Twimber somehow only broke a prop after that impact with a tree. The Twimber is thick. The extra plastic needed to move the motors to the wings, the extra motor, thick 2-in-1 ESC, bigger battery, and the longer wiring all add significant chonk. This puts more stress on the landing gear, which Horizon clearly wanted to be as strong as possible, so that had to get even bigger. All told, the Twimber is a whopping 95 ounces or nearly 6 pounds ready to fly with a 4S 5000. Don't let anyone tell you heavy bush planes are okay. If they were, then why do all full-scale bush pellets rip out every ounce of weight they can to maximize STOL performance? With the Twimber being obese, Horizon opted to make the wing bigger, and holy crap is it big. Horizon doesn't publish the wing area for this plane or any new ones at all, probably because their calculators don't go that high, or because Jason said,
no.
That's okay though, Horizon's censorship didn't stop us. We grabbed a tape measure and deduced that its wing area was roughly 753 square inches, and with a 5000 4S, its wing cube loading came out to 7.9. That's about the same as the Timber Evo, which this plane does feel like in the air. There's more info on wing cube loading in the description below, and stay tuned in the future for a video all about it. We really wish Horizon would at least publish this information. Anyway, the problem with enlarging the wing to fix a heavy airplane is that what we really get in the end is a bigger airplane with a tail that is too small and short, and this is how the Twimber flies. The Twimber can hover, but it's more difficult than it should be, and it's so much twitchier, partially thanks to the differential thrust, and less forgiving than a lighter plane of the same size or a longer plane of the same weight. Horizon disagrees about the differential thrust making it harder to hover though.
You get a little bit of rudder action, but you also get a little bit of throttle action as well. Makes it a little easier to hover.
Skill issue? You decide. We will say though, that we could have used the optional full span ailerons and or flaperons, which would have helped with the roll control in a hover, but we opted not to, because we never felt like we needed more roll control in the first place. With a full battery in the stock props, you're getting about 110 ounces or 6.9 pounds of thrust.
Nice.
But a fair bit less once you're down a bit in the pack. This Timber felt as dumb and bitey as an inbred Chihuahua compared to the original lineage with its less than forgiving stall habits. Our stall testing yielded the same results with the fixed slats on or off. It would always lead to a wing drop and then a spin if you allowed the stall to fully develop. With its big boy ailerons, be ready to use that rudder as there's quite a bit of adverse yaw. Moving forward, let's address what causes the bad nose-over tendencies on this plane. First, since the wing is wider than your mom, the flaps are far back. That means they tend to pick the tail up, especially when you give it throttle, since the props blow right at them, kind of like vectored thrust. The thrust line is also very high, so the props pull the top of the airplane forward. The result is that goosing the throttle at low or with no airspeed strongly rotates the airplane nose down. Give it the beans on a takeoff or touch and go, and it will nose over. If you like stress-free takeoffs or touch and goes, this is not the airplane for you. We weren't the only ones with these issues, either. The out-of-the-box roll rate is about the same as a Timber X without full span ailerons. The following was done on stock differential thrust settings. It will do slow rolls, 4 points, and even knife edges, but be gentle on the rudder or the differential makes things weird. It'll do continuous rolls as well, which are always fun no matter what the plane is. No torque or P-factor from the counter-rotating props means negative pushes are predictable, and flat turns are drama-free as well. You can do some high alpha if you stay on top of the wing rock. We did note that high alpha right side up led to some wing rock without the fixed slats, but once we glued them on, thanks to the motors being right at the leading edge of the wing forcing air through them, the fixed slats dramatically reduced the wing rock and high angles of attack. We did try out inverted high alpha, and it was actually one of the few things this plane does well too. Whether it's in the air or on the ground, it likes to be on its back, kinda like your mom. If you decide to build this plane instead of throwing it in the trash, just 30 minutes of mindless screwing and you're done, no glue required. Horizon's typically excellent manual makes this simple. It's clear that they have figured out that the easier they make it to buy, assemble, and crash an airplane, the faster people will do that and buy more. As far as our setup, we went with max control throw on the tail and left the ailerons alone because from a geometry standpoint, they couldn't be any closer than the middle hole, and flaps had sufficient travel for us stock. We also opted to get the bind and fly version so we can more easily and quickly utilize the differential thrust options, but we turned off AS3X and Safe as a personal preference. She doesn't come with floats, but we have to admit that this would be a great float plane, seeing as it has differential thrust, reverse thrust, and even differential reverse thrust. This is a 4S plane, and you'll get about 3 minutes with a 2200, 5 minutes with a 4000, or 6 minutes with a 5000, which isn't that long, especially considering the thrust available is meh. Speaking of math thrust, we opted to throw on these fancy 10x5 macro quad props from HQ Prop, and they did help quite a bit with the punch-out from hovering. Anyway, when it's time to land, the Twimber doesn't really like to slow down like a lighter plane of the same size. You can forward slip it, but go easy on the rudder or differential thrust will kick in like a sneaky edible. Luckily, if you utilize a Speed Demon approach speed and opt to get on the reverse thrust rather than just going around, it has the opposite effect as takeoff thrust, rotating the plane back and sticking the tail down. But be careful, because any significant amount of taxiing backwards will rip the tailwheel off. Awesome. At least when it eventually flips on its nose, you can use reverse thrust to get it back on the tailwheel. The Twimber really feels like a cynical, cash-grabbing gimmick. The idea of a fun bush twin with differential thrust is extremely appealing. However, in reality, it needs more thought put into it than strong landing gear, a bigger wing, and locking consumers into your own tech to utilize the reverse and differential thrust selling points. We understand this is all subjective, and maybe these shortcomings won't bother everybody as much as us, but we expected a little more polish on a $379 release. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you think we should cancel timber culture of it being the best flying plane, or maybe even hit subscribe if you'd like to watch us slice our Twimber in half and turn it into 2 separate flying aircraft. Sad landings, nose went over for us, and we'll catch you next week with a new upload if we regain the will to keep doing this.
Yeah, see? Whoa! God damn!